Excellent. We hold these bio-briefing series in association with the NNFCC. We've been doing this now for almost 2 years, and it's proved to be a very, very successful partnership. And I'm delighted to introduce, as our first speaker tonight, Michael Goldsworthy, who's actually first time speaking at one of these events. He's a consultant with NNFCC and very much a specialist in this area. So without further ado, Michael, over to you. Just make sure I click that on.
Hopefully you can all hear me. Is that working? Right, before I start, thank you very much to Clive for inviting me here this evening, and Ortho Smith and Williamson for hosting this event. As Clive mentioned, hopefully I'll just be sort of setting the scene for you, giving you an introduction to the anaerobic digestion process, and give you a little bit of information of what's going on in the industry in the UK at the moment. So, firstly, I just want to give you a little bit of company background to the NNFCC. I'll then give you a little bit of an overview of the anaerobic digestion process. So hopefully many of you here will be familiar with the technology, but for those of you who aren't, hopefully this will provide us a little bit of a guide to what we're actually speaking about. I'll then give you an idea of the incentives for anaerobic digestion in the UK at the moment, of which there are quite a few. And finally, I'll just let you know what's going on in the industry and what's the picture looking like moving forward. So the NNFCC, who are we? We are a bioeconomy consultancy based up in York. We were originally established as a national centre, but now we operate purely as a commercial consultancy. We have expertise on the conversion of biomass to a range of products, including bioenergy, biofuels, biobased chemicals and products. And we do have a very keen interest in anaerobic digestion. So just to give you a historical overview of what we've been involved in, specifically we were involved in the development and also the delivery of the UK AD strategy and action plan that was published back in 2011. We maintain the official AD portal on behalf of DEFRA. So the AD portal is a website which basically provides as an information hub for the anaerobic digestion industry. And we're soon to publish a report entitled The Anaerobic Digestion Deployment in the United Kingdom. And much of the information contained within this report I'll be presenting you to you tonight. So just to give an overview of the anaerobic digestion process, it's a microbial technology, so we have essentially a large-scale digester which we can input a range of organic feedstocks into, such as slurry and manure from agricultural livestock, crops and crop residues, food wastes, amongst a range of other feedstocks. The microbes in the digester will metabolize this, producing a biogas. Now, the biogas is a mixture of a range of gases, predominantly methane, which is essentially chemically identical to natural gas, and CO2. So there's a range of things we can do with the biogas. We can combust it directly in a combined heat and power engine, producing heat which can be used locally and power which can be exported to the electricity grid, or as is more frequently occurring now, and hopefully more frequently in the future, we can upgrade this biogas to biomethane. So we can essentially purify the methane component of that gas, and then we can either inject that directly into the gas grid, or we can containerize it and use it as a transport fuel. The residue of the anaerobic digestion process is a digestate material which is can be essentially used as a fertilizer. So farmers can utilize this process to produce their energy and then utilize this digestate and put it back on their fields as a fertilizer. So the AD incentives available in the UK. So predominantly the anaerobic digestion industry utilises the feed-in tariff system for claiming incentives, which provides a fixed tariff for the amount of electricity generated and also another tariff for the electricity that's exported to a grid. For AD, there's 3 separate tariffs for small scale, so that's any plant of a size up to 250 kilowatt electric. Medium scale, which is 250 kilowatt electric to 500 kilowatt, and large scale, which is anything larger than that. The feed-in tariffs has recently, I'm sure as many of you have been aware, been subject to budget mechanisms, which means that the small and medium scale have seen a significant reduction in the available incentive. We have the renewables obligation, which is generally more targeted at the large-scale generators, but any installation above 50 kilowatt is eligible to claim these renewable obligation certificates, which are tradable. They can be sold to an electricity supplier, and at the moment AD receives 2 renewable obligation certificates per megawatt hour of electricity generated. Finally, we have the renewable heat incentive, which moving forward might be a more useful and a more important form of support for the AD industry, which AD can have a fixed tariff for the amount of usable heat generated. Currently, biomethane injection into the grid and small-scale combustion is supported, but moving forward, we should also have medium and large-scale combustion. So those tariffs are those that are available to the AD industry in England, Scotland, and Wales. The Northern Ireland industry is slightly different. They only really have a single incentive scheme available to them, which is the Northern Ireland renewables obligation. Functions very similarly to the renewables obligation in the rest of the UK, except there's higher levels of support available, and consequently we're starting to see a much larger level of deployment in Northern Ireland. So moving on to what the industry looks like currently in the UK. The information moving forward now is all taken from our forthcoming report, which provides a comprehensive overview of deployment in the UK AD industry. I'll just be presenting the sort of high-level results from this report, but the report analyses the sector on a plant-by-plant basis, providing very detailed information on feedstock volumes and capacity, as well as locational information. And so if anyone's got any interest in this, please come speak to me at the networking session later on this evening. So before I go forward with the data, I just want to provide a few definitions so you understand quite what I'm referring to as I go through the data. In regards to plant scale, small scale, as I've said, refers to installations with an installed capacity of 250 kilowatt electric and below, in line with the definition under the feed-in tariffs. Medium scale, between 250 kilowatt and 500, and large scale above. And we also distinguish AD plants in the report by plant type. Now, because AD can accept a range of organic feedstocks, it can be quite difficult to segregate based on what feedstock is used by the anaerobic digestion plant. But for the purpose of the report, we utilise the term of waste fed, referring to any installation where the contribution of municipal waste, commercial waste, or industrial waste is more than 50% of the feedstock requirement for that plant. And farm-based, a farm-based plant is any plant which has a contribution of farm-based feedstock, such as slurries, such as crops, vegetable outgrades, of greater than 50% towards the overall feedstock requirement. What the report does omit is the sewage-based AD landscape. So AD has historically been used quite widely by waste treatment works, but this is excluded from the data that I'm presenting. So this is a map showing all the plants that are currently operational. Those are the ones shown in green on the map, and all other plants in the development pipeline. So currently in the UK, we've got 138 operational plants. We have 65 which are farm-fed and 73 which are waste-fed, so fairly evenly distributed. Waste-fed plants are generally have a high capacity, and so the capacity contributed by the waste-fed plants is around twice that of what we're seeing from the farm-fed sector. Moving forward, we have another 342 plants under development, seeing a slightly greater contribution of farm-fed, but that might change given the recent developments in with the feed-in tariff digression. And of these plants, we have 15 biomethane to grid projects, 5 of which are operational, 10 of which are under development. Now, there's actually probably a few more than I've presented here, because biomethane to grid is much better suited towards the larger scale plants, and so quite often the sewage treatment sector are starting to be more interested in the biomethane to grid, and they're obviously omitted from this data. So, moving forward, what would we see? Well, if all plants currently under development completed, then capacity is likely to quadruple by 2017. In reality, we can only really expect around 30 to 50% of these plants to complete due to issues surrounding the availability of finance, and as well as the availability of feedstock. And like I've mentioned, the digression in the feed-in tariffs could restrict this deployment even further. But it's still, regardless, a relatively healthy industry. Comparing size of the plants, we currently see large-scale plants dominate in terms of capacity. These large-scale plants are usually fed by the likes of food waste from municipal and commercial sources. But we have a similar number of plants, a similar number of medium-scale plants as we do large-scale plants. Deployment of biomethane to grid is still at a low level, and I thought that graph had it on there, but clearly not. But as I mentioned on the previous slide, we've only got about 15 in the development pipeline. And again, with the digression, we could expect to see a larger contribution of large-scale plants in the future. So if we look at the required feedstock volumes, those 138 operational plants we have require almost 1.5 million tons of food waste, 750,000 tons of energy crops, so the likes of maize and grass silage, a similar amount of other waste. So this generally includes a lot of industrial waste such as brewery effluent, abattoir waste and the like. Around 500,000 tons of manure and slurry, and around 200,000 tons of crop waste such as vegetable outgrades and apple pomace. Moving forward, again, if theoretically all plants in development pipeline to complete by 2017, we'd expect to see over 5 million tons of food waste going into AD, over 2.5 million tons of energy crops, over 2 million tons of other industrial wastes, almost 2 million tons of manure and slurry, and around 500,000 tons of crop waste. So one of the concerns around AD is the fact that we're utilising energy crops in the process, and so it's useful to have an understanding of the required area of cropland. Now, currently, if we assume a yield of maize and of grass of 45 fresh tonnes per hectare, then the current UK AD industry would require around 17,000 hectares of land, and moving forward, if all plants were to complete, this would increase to 60,000 hectares of land, which, although sounds quite a large area, that equates to roughly around 1% of the available cropland in the UK. And it should also be highlighted the fact that AD uses a lot of crops which are often utilised as break crops. So whereas this 60,000 hectares might sound a lot, it might not necessarily be an additional 60,000 hectares. So I think just to, before I summarise, just to have a little look at the national deployment levels. We're currently seeing strongest deployment in England, but moving forward with the high level of support in Northern Ireland, we could expect to see their AD sector really moving on in the next couple of years. On a regional basis in the UK, really we're seeing a fairly balanced level of deployment, although in the east of England, where we have the greatest areas of cropland available, we're seeing particularly strong deployment. And while in some of the northern regions, deployment is slightly lagging behind, but the pipeline is still nevertheless relatively strong. So just to summarise, as you can see, the development pipeline is quite strong. We could see a quadrupling of capacity by 2017, though in reality it's a doubling of capacity is possibly a more realistic estimate. There are considerable challenges ahead for the farm scale AD sector with the changes in support. And we could see the RHA becoming a more important policy mechanism in the future, and hopefully that should stimulate further biomass to grid deployment. Hopefully, once the capital costs of upgrading the biogas is addressed. Yeah, and that's everything.